let's say, traits that one should have to be very successful in the product landscape.
Conviction, the courage, belief system coming in to say, I genuinely think this is going to change the world.
What opinions do you have today of how AI can be leveraged by products?
If you're thinking about going out and making a good product, if the ideas that you're coming in within the room is the equivalent of what ChatGPT is doing, I'm saying that you have not pushed the boundaries of good thinking at this point in time. So, because that shows your ability to connect dots better than anybody else.
Do things fast, fail fast, learn fast, iterate fast. There is a good thing in startups where you fail fast, but there's also a good thing to actually keep investing on something that you've thought about as a product. We have our special guest today, Deepak Krishnan. He also goes by the name DSK. First product you ever fell in love with?
Sony Walkman.
Who's harder to convince, user or stakeholder?
Stakeholders.
AI or human intuition?
And I think you really outsold me at this point of time.
Hey everyone, this is your host Atif, and welcome to the fourth episode of TechKeys by Mercari. TechKeys is one of a kind of podcast where we take a deep dive into everything tech and give you perspective about different domains from techies just like you. So today I want all of you to take a moment and think about all the apps that you have used or products that you have used since today morning. The alarm that took you out of your bed, your instant delivery app that delivered your coffee and milk in under 10 minutes, your news app that informed you that yellow line of Namma Metro is finally open for public, or your commute app, using which you went to your office, surviving the amazing traffic of Bangalore. While all of these apps make our lives easier and sometimes lazier, we often fail to realize that these apps are a result of multiple smart bets, bold experiments, and high-stake choices that product managers take. These decisions kind of make or break the product. In my experience of using products across different domains for the last decade and more, I have seen products that I've loved, go into oblivion, and products that I didn't even hear of kind of come into my life and become so essential part for my mental sanity. With all of that said, let's go into the episode, Product Compass, the journey of product, where we'll discuss what makes a product manager, what are the traits that define one, how they make choices, trade-offs, and decisions that soar their product. For that, we have our special guest today, Deepak Krishnan. He also goes by the name DSK. DSK has worn many hats in the product world, from founding his own ventures to scaling fast startups, and also driving product in enterprise companies. In his tenure, he has built products that have been used by millions. At the same time, adjusted to or adapted to multiple work styles across different organizations. And I kind of believe he's learned the trick of how to turn ideas into reality. Welcome to the podcast, Deepak. It's great to have you here. I know the next few hours is going to be fun discussion. I know you have a lot of cool stories to share. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on this podcast. And I think you really outsold me at this point of time. So I hope I can do some justice to this podcast. But thank you. It really means a lot to be on this podcast. And hope I can share some good stories with all of you.
Yes. So before I kind of go into the depths of understanding how product things, etc., let me riddle you with something. So if you could only install one third-party application on your phone, apart from, of course, the vanilla apps like your dialer, etc., let's also consider WhatsApp as another factory app.
Yeah.
What would be that one app that you would choose that would be there on your home screen if I just allowed one app to be installed?
I'm going to give you a very cliched answer now. I think it will be ChatGPT.
Okay.
I think it takes me back to the time when I first saw the internet.
Okay.
It's There's something very different about what it's capable of doing these days. So I've found myself uh, gradually shifting to being, starting my journey with Google to now
Okay.
starting to, having conversations with ChatGPT. So I think now it's become my default go-to partner for a wide range of conversations, right from work-oriented conversations to sometimes even very fun interpersonal conversations.
Yes.
So I do definitely find it to be that one app that I'd pin to my home screen. And if everything else was to be taken away, I think I'd still want that on my home screen. Cliched as it may sound, I think it's also uh, pointing to the fact that it's one of those great tectonic shifts that's happening in our times.
Exactly. I mean, such things happen in decades sometimes, right? Where it kind
Yes,
of changes most of our behaviors.
true.
Like, I mean, our habits kind of change with certain products. And
Yeah.
ChatGPT is one. Like you mentioned, you go for it for everything. So is it like your full replacement for anything that you search online, apart from let's say browsing products, etc. For anything related to seeking information? Is that the only place that you go to today?
It's not the only place, but it's definitely becoming one of my preferred
Okay.
go-to destinations. And it's not just in terms of per se actively seeking for information, but also to seek for perspectives, right?
Okay.
So typically, you go to Google when you have an active problem that you want to solve, like, hey, how do I
True.
do this,
Yes.
or what can I do for this, right? But in this particular case, it also turns out to be a great place to bounce off perspectives where I say, hey, I'm thinking about it this particular way. What do you think about it? Or I'm experiencing this. How do I interpret this? Now, these are brand new use cases, which in a prior era,
Seem to never
I would
exist.
probably be doing this by myself. Now, suddenly, because we do these conversations, rather monologues within our mind or
Yes.
with another human being,
Absolutely.
you're capable of doing these conversations with another entity. And that entity, by virtue of its training, is capable of giving you certain perspectives. It's not to say that these perspectives are always right, but in some scenarios, it does actually give a reasonably good set of perspectives, which actually helps most people in many interesting scenarios.
I think so much has happened in so little time, uh,
Yes,
especially when it comes to these chatbots becoming so sophisticated where they're actually changing how we access the internet, right?
true.
Uh, but one thing on the point that you mentioned, my experience with GPT has been that it's very much biased towards me. It tries to comfort me more, even
True.
though when I try to get perspectives,
Yeah,
it tends to always favor my opinions more.
true.
Maybe I should get better at prompts.
True. It is a little bit of that that friend who likes to please you a lot.
Yes, I think many of us, along with you, might choose GPT. Now that you mentioned, I was actually thinking about Reddit because that's one app that I can't live without. But now
Right.
that you mentioned GPT, I kind of think, yes, I think even for me, very soon it's going to replace uh, like a one single tool for everything. I think that's what Sam Altman also mentioned in one of his interviews, where he did mention that GPT is going to be everything in the future. It could so happen.
Interesting hypothesis.
But yeah, going into the product world now, Deepak, I want to understand from where did you start to build the mindset of building product for others? Was it in your early childhood? Was it in your teens? When did that spark of building for others and solving for others come into play? Was it just about solving a problem, or it was just pure hobby passion that that gave you that spark to probably think about building something?
If I was to go back in time and look at my childhood, I think one big part of it is, observing my parents, their lifestyle, and seeing your family in general, right? One of the most common things that you'd hear at home is, your parents come back home from work and they're usually not very happy with the work that they do,
True.
right? And one of the questions that used to run in my head as a kid was, it's where you're spending a significant portion of your life and time.
Yes.
And does it make sense then to do something which makes you not feel great at the end of the day? Sure, I mean, in those days, it was a lot of sacrifice, going to work. You had to do
Yes.
whatever you had to do to bring, food to the table. Survival was the
The mindset,
primary
yes, the mindset was, of
instinct,
course,
right? It was
for
about getting
survival.
through the day, making sure the family survived, making sure the kids were well taken care of.
Not
So
really a lot in quality of life,
yes, so
etc.
it
Yeah.
was, they definitely did a lot. So I'm now speaking from an incredible place of privilege, then, right? To even have such a thought to say, hey, is the purpose of work only to, make money, or could there be something else? So it did then strike upon me that, I definitely need to figure out something that gives me a lot of joy. Uh, and I really don't have a better way to explain it, but the fact that I did feel that, it would be utterly sad and depressing to live life, to do things repeatedly every single hour, every single minute, not
Okay.
enjoying what you had to do. And again, a privilege plays a lot of role to it in terms of the experience that shaped my life.
Yes.
At a very, very young age, I got exposed to a Sony Walkman, a Sega Mega Drive, which was, cartridge 16-bit
Yes.
games. And I loved all of these things, right? Like the ability to have a Walkman, you put your cassette into it, you can carry and walk around and listen to music anywhere, was mind blowing. Things I remember once uh, waking up in the middle of the night and going wake my parents, like, I think I found the secret to infinite energy. And they were like, okay, please explain. And my dad's an engineer, right? So, and I'm trying to
Okay.
explain to him, what if there's this device that drops this weight and it continuously falls and that pulls a pulley? And he's like, first go learn physics properly.
What age was this?
This was probably when I was 4 or 5. So, and
Wow.
all of these things would be just running in my head. And I would be sitting and designing cars, I'd be designing bikes. So I never knew why I did it, but I found it to be a lot of fun. So I felt that, growing up, I want to do all of these cool things. And I just did not know the pathway to it. One day, I actually picked up a very, very wrong book. The title was very misleading, and it was not my fault. The
Okay.
book was by Richard Branson, and it was Losing My Virginity. As a young kid, reasons why you pick up such a book. So I
I can
picked it
understand.
up,
Yeah.
and it changed my life. And when I saw the way this guy lived his life, going around starting businesses, living a life where he was doing a bunch of crazy experiments and having fun, I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to start building businesses. I'm going to build many businesses. I'm going to keep experimenting. I'm going to do a bunch of cool things. And I got to figure out how to end up being like Richard Branson. So Richard Branson was in one way a great idol to me. And the other
Okay.
hand, there was technology, and there was like the companies like the
You were
Googles and the
yeah.
Sonys of the world. And it's like, I want to be Richard Branson, but in the world of tech. So that was
Wow.
like a guiding principle in my head. And everything I've done since has been in pursuit of this obsession that started at childhood. So that's my origin. Like that's how I got sucked into the world of building products and businesses.
Interesting. So, from hearing you speak all of this, there were key things that I could grab as, let's say, traits that one kind of should have to be very successful in the product landscape is curiosity, imagination, and passion. I think these three things kind of in the right mix really set you up to be a good product. Don't you think so? Or is there any other what
It
I mean
definitely
trait as a whole?
is. These are definitely interesting traits. It does help me a lot, but that's not sufficient
Okay.
because imagination is great, but imagination can also be very wild. So I think it gave me the resilience
Yes.
to go through this journey. It gave me the conviction, the passion, the energy, right?
Yes.
But energy alone is not sufficient. Energy needs to be channeled and applied in the right
Direction
direction.
matters a lot. Direction, maybe as and when we speak, we'll think about it, talk about prioritization, etc. as well.
Yeah. At that point of time, the sheer joy that comes out of making certain
Exactly.
products, going through that journey, is far more fulfilling
Yes.
than certain other aspects that are very short term. But I definitely lacked a lot of very important skills necessary to make commercially viable, scalable products.
But when you mention the part about gratification that one gets when you build something and you see it
Yes.
go live and people use it and get benefit out of it,
Yeah.
what is that? What was your first experience of this? Was it very early, or was it during the time that you started to work as a product, or when was this? When was this time where you built something and you felt I've really hit the nail?
Interestingly, it was not actually products. While I was studying in school, I actually found a lot of fun in cultural activities.
Okay.
So I was made responsible for all things related to music, arts, festivals at school. So I used to have a lot of fun coming up with events. And my goal was to make the most fun school event where other people could come down to. And we'd say, okay, how do we make a great quiz competition? How do we make great topics for a debate? How do
Makes
we
sense.
make a great dance competition? And what does it make to, create the right experience for it?
It goes into that engagement angle. How can you
Yes.
make it more engaging?
And
Okay.
growing up in that school, it was really fun because I could organize a lot of these activities, conduct quiz competitions, and then figure out ways to, have fun along the way. And that kind of made it fun. And I could see a lot of delight in it. So I used to actually think growing up that maybe, I'm going to hold events as a business.
Maybe going to event management as a
maybe
as a
event
career.
management is going to be a thing. I really enjoyed hosting quiz competitions. I thought maybe I'll do a bunch of quiz competitions. So these were the
Nice.
kind of things that used to excite me. So it never actually started with product. It translated to a bunch of things which instantly happened, and I had a lot of fun doing it.
When did this realization come that, okay, maybe I should get serious right now and go into the product world very formally? Was it did that come over the period of time? Because I know you did engineering and then you went on to do diploma in management and then MBA. So when did that realization come to you? Okay, let me choose. This is the career path that I'm going to have because I like having fun in creating, managing things.
So, given the fact that I was very obsessed with companies like Sony, I thought that hardware is where I want to land up, and I would love having fun building electronic devices, and therefore it seemed natural that everyone said, "Hey, the right thing to do is electronics and communication engineering," and I was like, "All right, cool, so be it." So, managed to get into College of Engineering Indy as in the EC department, but that was really, really not my cup of tea. Like in the sense that I like designing, but I don't think I'm cut out to go deep into the engineering side of things. I realized that very early on. I really struggled to get through 4 years of college, and I had a lot of fun, but I don't think my grades would be anywhere close to it. So I realized that maybe I'm not cut out for certain things. And then it seemed that, okay, maybe management is the way forward.
Okay, it
right?
came that way.
This is what society tells you, right? If you don't do good at this, there's always a plan B.
You've anyway invested 4 years.
Yeah,
so
you
maybe
invested
try the
4 years. So
angle of
I said, okay, maybe management is what I have to do. Because, well, if I learn how to build a business, I may end up actually going down the path of starting, a
Makes
company
sense.
that makes a
Yeah,
product.
I would have
and
felt the
sell
same.
it. So I ended up going to Ahmedabad, where I suddenly land up in a place where I think I'm going to learn what it takes to build companies like the Googles and Yahoos of the world. And people are talking about investment banking, consulting. And I was like, okay, I've made yet another decision where I'm going to do a bunch of things where I really don't know where I'm going to land up. So I felt, okay, chalo, we'll learn a couple of things, and hopefully along the way, I will end up being in a tech company. 4 years of engineering, 2 years of an MBA, and I'm nowhere close to doing it. And at that point of time was when the entire Lehman Brothers collapse happened and went into the crisis.
This is 2007.
2009.
Nine,
right?
is it? The
Yes,
depression.
the
I'm sorry.
depression.
Yeah.
And it so turns out that, therefore, hiring was staying ahead. So it was a great excuse to go to my parents and tell them that
Didn't work out.
didn't work out, guys. It's not my fault. I tried hard, right? I tried hard. I used to think that, well, I've done my engineering. I've gone to do an MBA from IMA, so I've got to be one of the smartest people. So it's only obvious that if I start a company, I'm going to be very successful.
After that, you started your own startup of sorts, right?
Yes. So that's how I actually got into. I didn't know that was called as product management, let alone anything at that point of time.
Yes.
To me, the objective was build tech products, make money, be successful, right? Now, was it product management? No, I actually realized there was a job called as product management after a series of failures, like 3 startups back to back, absolute failures. So that's when, like, okay, if what I've learned thus far has not resulted in what I consider as success, then I need to go to some place to learn this better.
But I want to pause you here and ask: is that when you're trying to think of your own venture as as someone who wants to build something, oftentimes you're so associated with the idea, or you really look at it from a single lens. There's no one else to kind of give you a different perspective, that you're going in a rabbit hole that's not going to lead anywhere.
Yeah.
When do you start to think about taking a pause and maybe looking at something else? So in your experience of doing 3 startups,
Yeah.
right, when did you realize, okay, I think I should take a break, this is not working out? Did you wait for, let's say, was it very data driven, or was it just that you felt, okay, this is not going to be fun? Where did you make that decision that, okay, it's not going to go in the direction that I'm thinking?
So I think the beauty of building a business is the business will punch you in the face.
Okay.
It will tell you that you're not making any progress. And the reality is, at the end of the day, business is about making money, right?
Yes.
By solving meaningful problems. When there's no money coming in meaningfully, you know something is not making sense at the end of the day.
So money is that metric that you
as a startup, at the end of the day, if you're not commercially viable or you don't see traction, customers using your product, so there is some degree of metrics to say that
Yes.
people using your product,
acquisition of sorts. Yeah.
any metric you pick, which helps you to relate that I'm providing this value to customers, and there is some proxy which helps us to understand that the customers are deriving value from it. And in that process, they're also willing to transfer back some amount of the value to you, which you capture as economic value. You don't see that happening. You realize that something is not making sense.
With your experience, those startups didn't really work. Then you kind of went into this whole, okay, let me look at established startups. That's when you started to decide, okay, let me go to people who have solved this. Or before that, you try to get into something to learn about.
No, I decided that my goal was to say that, hey, the best builders seem to be in the valley.
Yeah.
I can't fly to the valley. I don't have the money. So I need to find an option which is just as good, but in India. So looked around, and there was Google at that point of time, and there was Zynga. And Zynga was fun because it was gaming.
Yes.
So I'd sent them a couple of game designs. And so anything that allows me to be in the heart of learning what it takes to build a product, put it out there.
Absolutely.
And they said, that's where you come in. You can join as a product manager. So I actually joined as an associate product manager. So I was like, why not, man? Like, I finally get to be in this environment. I'm going to get to learn. So that's how I got into product management. And that's how I got to even know that there existed a domain called as product management, which works with engineering, design, business, make these kind of decisions.
At that time, this was what, early 2000, early 2010? 2012. I think this is where the smartphone industry was kind of coming in.
True.
The adoption, not just here in India and across the world, I think we were starting having more Androids, and iOS, I think, had three or four revisions by then.
Yeah, right.
So what did you as product or your team at that time were thinking of? Was it just about increasing the adoption of your app, or was it about keeping people more engaged? What was that thought process during that time?
So in 2012, Zynga was still predominantly a web games company.
Okay.
We had not yet gone on to mobile. We, in fact, I think that was one of my personal gripes as to why aren't we getting into the mobile wave. So our goal was to figure out, everything was quantified. Every stage of the game, what were players doing, what were players not doing, how do we look at everything from an analytical sense and figure out how do we get players to keep coming back to the game over and over again?
Essentially to retention.
Engagement, retention, monetization, right? So how do you drive all of this, and how does numbers become a quintessential part of your decision-making framework? Numbers are good, but there's also the element of understanding human behavior, design, and delight. When you marry these two is when you get a lot of magic. Numbers by in itself don't tell us the complete picture. Understanding human behavior by in itself also doesn't give you the complete picture. So finding out a good balance between the two is very hard, because usually organizations tend to lean into one of these paradigms, right? Either you're extremely numbers driven, or you're extremely behavior, psychology, delight driven, and trying to find a middle path is a conflict of ideologies.
But how do you get that insight about, without numbers, how do you get that insight about liking of a user to a certain product?
So numbers tell you what is working, but if you want to bring something new, right, it has to come from somewhere, and there are no numbers usually associated with it, right? To give you an example, at Zynga, I recall that we started bringing one of the games from the SF office to India to
Okay.
run it out of India. So at that point of time, I remember clearly that the lead who was managing that game at that point gave a clear set of rubrics and guiding principles saying, these are the things that won't work. And we were like, sure, we hear you.
Okay.
And they had already given us a playbook on what needs to be and what not, right? But one of the interesting things that was also happening culturally at that point of time was Game of Thrones was starting to take off.
Okay, the web
And
series.
the
Yeah.
web series.
Yeah. No, not the web series. It's a TV
The
series.
TV
Yeah,
series,
yeah,
right?
correct.
And our game was also a very, medieval style game,
Okay.
right? And the designers and product managers who had built the game and had reseen it to, the first round of success were very convinced that a certain thematic style of game would not make money. But I'd actually seen a few players' comments in a very obscure community
Okay.
where they were talking about Game of Thrones, and
Okay.
Game of Thrones was taking off. So we had a thesis that we could actually bring in some of the design elements that we see in Game of Thrones. It's not to say that we want to replicate the narrative, but
Makes
we
sense.
know that it's culturally popular. If we bring in those design elements and a little bit of those gameplay and fun, it may end up being
It could
very
cling,
delightful.
yeah.
It could click. But there was hardly any data for it, right? And even the limited data was some obscure comment in some community.
Okay.
So when we made this pitch to the leadership, they were like, this is not going to work. We've done this. We know it's not going to work. So at this point of time, I was like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? It's better to ask for forgiveness than to,
Not
ask
probably
permission. So,
try it out, yeah.
and a bunch of us said, we will build this and not tell anyone about it.
Wow. Okay.
So we actually built it, launched it, and it started making a ton of money. And they were like, whoa, what's happening? How's this game making so much money? And we were like, sorry, but we went behind your backs and actually built this. And they're like, but this was not supposed to work. And we said, well, it is working. And we have a very strong conviction that it's tapping into the cultural realms of what people are getting exposed to. And that's why we were very convinced to build this. So they're like, okay, great. So that's why I do feel that, sometimes numbers can bias you. Sometimes things that may have worked in the past and failed can work in the present. So at that point of time, you may have had numbers.
Yes.
All the numbers can be very convincing, but the world is constantly changing, right? We are not putting out software or products which are being used by machines. They're being used by human beings.
Exactly.
And humans are living in an ever-changing world. And all of those factors do affect our motivations, our ambitions, our aspirations, our abilities, our constraints. And if we're not tuned to that, we then miss out on some of these mega tectonic events that are happening. And some of those can be tapped into to making very commercially viable products. If you do some new innovation grounds up, chances are it's most of the time the early ones is an absolute disaster. So where do you have the conviction? There is hardly any data. So somewhere someone has to have this belief system coming in to say, I genuinely think this is going to change
Sure.
the world. And there is no data. It's just we're connecting a bunch of observations we've made in the world
Correct.
with human behavior and our conviction of technology, where the technological curve is heading, where human behavior is heading. And we have some conviction
Very
that these two are going to
convergent.
marry sometime in the future. And it's a conviction-led exercise. There's really no way I can give you any data at this point of time.
Yeah, I think that's where I kind of come to a piece where in enterprise companies or companies which are or a startup which do have multiple product managers and different stakeholders, prioritization or direction setting. Let's talk about direction setting first, right? Because there are multiple proposals that come in from different, let's say, groups inside product managers. On what basis do, let's say, the higher management or let's say people with authority to choose the direction, right? On what factors do they start looking at? I know numbers is one, but for things like to create new verticals or domains in an organization.
See, ultimately, every company exists to serve two meta purposes, right? One, the organization is obsessed with an idea of what the world should be. The second is shareholder value maximization, to say that we are
Making
an
money.
economic machine.
Yeah.
We are in the business of making money. However, we also have to understand that every business that has been in existence at some point will cease to exist simply because the market forces are continuously changing. Technology is ever changing, consumer behaviors are changing, social structures are changing,
Yes.
political structures are changing, which
Absolutely.
means when all of these things are changing, it's highly unlikely that the conditions that were necessary for a business to be successful today can continue to keep it successful,
Yes.
right? And that also then comes the challenge of the individuals who are steering the ship. What are their motivations, incentives, and fears, right? To steer a large corporation is a lot of risk attached. You have many people's careers on the line, you have shareholders' money on the line. So, how do you then make the right kind of judgment calls?
Exactly.
Is a very, very tough decision, right? It's going to be a function of the ideology, constraints, and abilities. Somewhere within these three meta systems, people find a safe equilibrium to make good bets, right?
So I'll probe you on this. I think this decisions for startups is much easier to
Yes,
make versus for an established product, right? And
100%.
I think that is one of the main reasons why we see a lot of successful startups, but see enterprise kind of get stuck on the same amount of growth or the same amount of let's say acquisition, etc.,
True.
right? And also I think in startups something that I also notice is at least in the product sense is do things fast, fail fast, learn fast, iterate fast. There is a good thing in startups where
Yeah.
you fail fast,
Yeah.
but there's also a good thing to actually keep investing on something that you've thought about as a product, right?
True.
In your experience, right, what has made more sense? Like, what if you any examples that you had where maybe you killed something really fast? I'll tell you another example. There was this food delivery app, right? Tiny Owl in
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah.
They were essentially very similar to what Zomato is today. But maybe they tried a bunch of things. They tried partnering with restaurants, etc. back in 2014.
Yeah.
But Zomato came in 2017, 2018. I know there's a lot of factors like timings, market. Geo might have not had penetrated by then, but later we had with Zomato. Does situation matter? The market situation matter? Or it's all about how much you can pour in money to keep sustaining, just to wait until this becomes successful, right? So because I see both examples and I tend to get confused of what is the right way. Is the startup way right or the enterprise way right?
So I'll probably start with enterprises and give you an example there, right? If you recall Airbnb when it first came out, right? Now, well, everyone understands the Airbnb story, right? You get a bunch of houses which are,
Yep.
unoccupied, you put it onto a network, and, it starts building into a marketplace. One could then question, hey, why couldn't Booking.com do this? Or why wouldn't any of the traditional hotel aggregators do this? And actually, there's a very strong reasons as to why someone like a Booking.com would think 100 times before doing this. Because if you think about a company like Booking.com, they've built enormous amount of trust. They're working with hotels, and there's a lot of compliance that is going on behind the scenes, right? We're talking about people's safety, right? Food hazards, right? The fact that you're staying at a hotel, if there's fire hazards, there has to be protocols that need to be followed, right? If there's any kind of risk, you need a risk mitigation program. And so, when you are a company at the scale of Booking.com, your shareholders are extremely observant. If, let's say, there was a lawsuit filed against you for gross negligence,
Makes sense.
it affects the brand to such an extent. So there's actually this very interesting video by Jen Fogler, the CEO of Booking.com, where he says, it's not that we did not know about Airbnb, but we did. But you have to also understand that, the company at the scale and size Booking.com operates, there's a lot of risks for us to pull off this. Now, today, Booking.com is doing this, having seen
Yes.
that
Yes.
the mechanics
Stays
works. A lot of the unknown unknowns on trust and safety have been solved for well. But for them to take that bet, one, for a large company, you're always going to be looking for some kind of an evidence where your revenue growth is 30 to 40% year on year, right? And if the market that you're chasing is appearing to be tiny and it's going to take you, let's say, 8 to 10 years, it's very difficult to convince that as a shareholder story to a bunch of people, unless of course you have this incredibly powerful charisma to convince, right?
True.
So which means that large companies, enterprises, have to protect their wealth. So it's a lot like how we say it's easy to make money, but it's very difficult to protect the wealth that we make. It's very difficult to protect wealth that has been generated at scale, and to ensure that jobs are safe, your shareholders are safe, and your company has the economic staying power to continue staying in business for a reasonable period of time to evolve, right? So enterprises do try their best. In fact, there's another story as well of Kodak, where a lot of us use that as the quintessential story to say Kodak was sleeping on $1 billion opportunity. How big a fool was the management team? But if you actually go deep into the history of how photographic films evolved, how the technology of cameras evolved, when did digital technology actually take off? The leadership team at Kodak actually made the right call at that point of time, because that was the inflection wave for still films to be taking off, and they were able to
Okay.
capture the market for at least another 15 to 20 years. If you look at digital as a technology, yes, it did play a role. In fact, it did come out of Kodak. But as you say, the timing to the market is critical. Digital only started taking off almost 20 years later. So, yes, they were sitting on a gold mine, but for that leadership at that point when digital came out, it was not the right technology choice, right? So there are a lot of factors which make us actually look and critique enterprises. In fact,
Exactly.
many times enterprises do the right things with their constraints. And yes, there are obviously there are going to be a couple of examples that we can cherry pick and say, hey, but what if they could have? But
Yes.
it's very easy for us to sit in, for a lack of a better, our high horse or high chair
Yeah.
and say, hey, they could have done this. But rarely do we actually understand the conditions, the constraints, and the amount of risk involved to protect enterprise value. For a startup which has not even hit Series A, it's all
Exactly.
paper money, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, what is $100 million valuation? But a paper money. You've not made revenue. You probably don't have EBITDA. You probably don't have P&L at this point of time. So it's just
Yeah.
numbers, and it's hopeful that
Absolutely.
sometime it will. So that $100 million paper money disappearing overnight is not a big deal. But a
I can
couple of
understand.
$1 billion in real money disappearing overnight is a real genuine problem. So I would say that I think we're a little too harsh on enterprises in their inability to innovate. But if you actually look at today's companies, like say the Metas of the world or some of the other companies as well, sometimes
Yeah.
they have been able to actually ride out technological waves really, really well. In fact, amongst the mobile revolution companies, it's only probably the Ubers and maybe Airbnb, maybe Instagram are probably few startups that came out. But a
Yes.
vast majority of the economic value actually captured went back to Google, went back to Facebook. So
True.
there's actually a VC firm that actually sat and captured all the economic value created at different eras to show that enterprises actually do a very meaningful job, especially enterprises which are very fine tuned to the market. They actually have a good understanding, they have the right risk mitigation profile. So what we actually end up doing is then cherry pick a couple of stories and then frame it and say, enterprises don't do this.
DSK, now that you've shared insights about how product decisions kind of get made, on what factors they get made in startups versus enterprise, from all the experiences that you have had, I want to go into the depths of understanding how this landscape is currently changing. I feel in the tech domain, at least, there's a lot of content already out there of how AI should be used by engineers who are writing code or writing tests or building something. But for product, I know a lot of products that I work with use it for better PRDs, a lot of good prototyping before they come to engineers, etc. But what is that you would recommend, or what opinions do you have today of how AI can be leveraged by products, either working in startups or enterprise, and also leaders at that point, right, who make that decision of direction?
So let's probably look at from the journey from an idea to execution, right?
Yeah.
So the first problem is the discovery problem statement in itself, right? Here I do feel that, I think most people think it's good to go ask ChatGPT to say, hey, given this problem, can you give me insights? you may get some answers, but you have to also understand that what ChatGPT is giving out is a condensed version of what is already on the internet. And this assumes that all of human behavior in the context of the business that you're solving is exactly as is on the internet, which is not true. It is at best probably fractionally represented. So either the problem that you're solving may have similar profile, but it's the nuances which make the difference as to what makes the product work in the context of your business and your constraints. So let's say you're coming up with the notion of login.
Got it.
Now, login at an abstraction level looks the same for everyone.
Absolutely.
But different organizations will have different principles. For example, with banking, how you think about login will be very different in terms of the security, the number of checks that you're
Yes.
putting in,
Yes.
versus say a company like, say, I don't know, some casual app where
Yeah.
if the security is a little lax, really doesn't. I mean, it's not that security is absent, but you're not going to put a ton of filters to protect the audience, right?
Yes.
So the context matters. And if one were to just say, hey, write me a PRD, or what are all the top problems that companies face, you are going to get at best a very tiny sliver of information, which may or may not be relevant to your audience, right? So discovery, I still feel, is a huge part of that work. And in terms of making high quality, meaningful, impactful products, product managers do have to spend time digging through data, talking to customers, and
Okay.
finding out insights.
So you're telling GPT just has the context window of what's available on the internet.
And that is not the entirety of the universe, right? That means that internet is equivalent to all of human knowledge, which is not true.
Absolutely
It
not,
is
yeah.
at best a fraction. A huge amount of our data is still completely offline in your brains, in other
Yes.
systems. They are not online, right? So if you were to assume that, that's probably one fallacy that will affect us in quality of product building.
Got it.
The second is in the aspect of discovery in itself, right? You would be speaking to customers, and now there are the capabilities of summarization. Now, one way of looking at summarization is say that, hey, I have a lot of customer data, conversations, tell out the top points.
Yep.
But summarization itself is also an art. What you consider to be an insight may not be insightful to me. So there is judgment called there.
Yes.
So if you ask a large language model to synthesize, according to what it thinks as a prediction pattern, it'll pull out a certain set of keywords and say, hey, here's what I think is a good summary. But having done a lot of these customer interviews myself and time spoken, I can see that when a PM looks at it and says, hey, this insight, I've said, that's great, but have you gone one level deeper? And they're like, oh, we have not. And we need to go into this because this is a little odd statement. That sense of what can be an odd statement, which doesn't actually make sense. ChatGPT will never have it because it is not gone through enough of your own fine tuning that you've done with data to catch those few odd points which actually open up a whole plethora of insights.
Correct. So you lose some things in between the
Very
lines.
critical things. So
Okay.
it sounds nice, but I think the devil lies in the detail for making good products. So I would still say a lot of aspects of discovery, while you may have these tools, I probably will being a little old school right now, saying that no, do the hard work yourself, right? Likewise, when it comes to decision making, you can ask ChatGPT to say, given my organizational constraints, context,
Yes.
etc., come up with a range of solutions. Right?
Yes.
So it helps in coming up with solution spaces.
True.
The way I like to think about it is to say that if you're an emerging PM, probably use it as a thought partner to get your product skills to the market, saying, this is the global average of what looks like a good solution space. And am I able to even match it? But if you're thinking about going out and making a good product, if the ideas that you're coming in within the room is the equivalent of what ChatGPT is doing, I'm saying that you have not pushed the boundaries of good thinking at this point of time. So I would rather use that as a filter to say that, hey, is my team able to come up with ideas over and above what a ChatGPT can suggest? Because that shows your ability to connect dots better than anybody else. That is the superpower in building products.
So you still feel that part of connecting dots, given the right context, is still missing. I mean, missing from GPT, and only a human can probably solve it.
It's not that ChatGPT can't do it. It can only do it with what has been connected fairly well. See, it's a probabilistic system where the probabilities lie that this is how it's been connected.
I mean,
it
I
makes
understand.
similar extrapolations. But your ability to connect completely two otherwise disconnected dots in very interesting ways, it's not to say ChatGPT may not reach that. But as of today, I still think humans are way better at it. Right? So that act of going through the solution space and identifying really innovative solutions, great. You have to do it. But if you're relying on the machine, the chances are that you're going to get to what everybody else is thinking. So most companies at some point are competitive. almost everyone is going to ask the same questions. We're all going to get the same sort of solutions. We're all going to probably use the same prioritization frame, which means then you have nothing left to differentiate yourself in the market.
So there's a human angle that you have to put in for innovation as of today.
Yes. Okay. And that's why prioritization, again, people say, hey, you can give rubrics, you can give frameworks, etc. It's good, but you still have a judgment call on what makes for the right sequence. You have a judgment call as to why certain things should be connected in certain different ways. Okay. So that is something, see, at the end of the day, we are also in many ways like a large language model. We've been accumulating insights, connecting the dots. And that is over, let's say, I'm now turning 39, turning 40. I have 40 years of accumulation of data, which I'm connecting the dots to see what makes sense. So I still feel that a large part of product work has human value attached to it. I think prototyping is probably the one big use case where I see an insane amount of value, because it's a lot like what the photocopier did. It allowed you to create copies, except these are differentiated copies. And it does take human time to come up with all of these variations. So those variations for you to see quickly, sell a story, come up and convince stakeholders, that I think is a great value add.
I agree too. I think the turnaround time to do very quick, let's say,
prototypes, experiments.
Not just prototype, let's say even, I mean, I see a lot of products do a lot of consumer testing or consumer understanding, etc. Right? Earlier, I think a lot of that was done through questionnaires, etc. Maybe these days you could actually create a prototype, put it in people's hand, and say, "What do you think of the experience?" Exactly. I think that definitely yes, I would agree as well.
Then the other interesting area that I think there's a lot of value is in synthetic user testing. So you can start simulating real user behavior. So one of the biggest challenges with companies is the time it takes to do, let's say, do an A/B test. You have to put it out to the market. You have to scale out to traffic. Now, one of the new capabilities that is coming out of LLMs is the ability to generate synthetic users who can look and feel like real users in terms of the data sets they're generating. And therefore, you can test your products a lot faster without actually having to wait to go to market. So I think that's one of the key interesting areas where I think there are a couple of startups coming up and helping say that if you have existing user data, we will help creating synthetic user databases, and you can run your tests on top of this a lot quicker and faster. And that allows you to catch a lot of flaws in your product without having to go to market and wait for a couple of weeks. So your cycle time for production comes down dramatically. So I think these are two interesting areas where I personally would probably put a lot more of my bets into. And for all the other areas which require creativity and all that, like, for example, people say write a PRD with it. It's at best another PRD that somebody has written. I might as well take that PRD, right? It's just missing. So your product's context is what makes your PRD different, right? Your product's constraints, your organizational constraints, your guiding principles. Two products may look the same, but may have very different guiding principles. And if you don't pay attention to it, you end up building something that looks like that product, but it doesn't serve your audience at all. So I still feel a lot of product work cannot not be automated. Alignment of stakeholders cannot be done by a stakeholder. By ChatGPT. This one may assist you, but may not do.
I mean, of course, it can never kind of help you to align people, but it can power you with a lot of information that you could use to prepare yourself better. If you're really having really high conviction of something, you could definitely gather in all the supporting data so that you can go strong with your opinion or with your thought process.
To a reasonable extent. And one interesting use case is also that, if you're tuning into meetings and listening to your stakeholders, you get better at storytelling. So you can understand how this person has spoken, and you can say, hey, this is what I delivered. This is what the person responded. Is there a better way of retelling the story so that I can align my stakeholders? So that act has to be done by you, but this can act as, let's say, a communications or a language coach for you to improve your style and delivery of convincing your stakeholders. So there are these interesting pockets where I definitely see high leverage actions, but I wouldn't want to paint a blanket statement to say every part should be done by GPT. I think the false positives that come out of it will be much larger, which will be quite detrimental to organizations.
Okay, so let me ask you a very hypothetical question. Let's say you were back in your young days. You had all the resources that you have today with GPT. The reason that I ask this is because I think there's a bunch of folks who might be looking at this, and maybe they are visioning to be a product manager in this day and age. How differently would your startups that didn't really work in that time, or your ideas, how different would it be if you had done the same things now? What changes would you probably do with the things that is available today?
Actually, contrarianly, I would not be too dependent on ChatGPT yet to solve it.
Okay.
Because even today, as I build my startup, most of my work actually just involves observing customers day in and day out. That's it. Looking at them, trying to go through their problems, trying to understand what are the nuances of the problem, trying to understand what are their constraints. And rarely do I use any chat GPT in any of this activity.
Okay, interesting.
Right? I actually, what I do today much better is I actually write down everything that I observe. So I have a logbook
Okay.
where every single conversation with my customers is being written down. Why did I think about what I did? What did I have as a conversation? So the only area that I actually think I use is not necessarily ChatGPT, but the voice to text transcribers. I actually use that a lot more efficiently. So I actually have them in all my meetings. I listen to it. I come back home, compare to my notes. And I actually spend a lot of time going through my notes today and trying to understand very, very deeply what is going on in my customer's life, and then spend an inordinate amount of time researching to figure out, okay, what are the ways in which this problem is being solved, and looking at some places like Reddit, YouTube, etc., to see are there any good solutions, what are the fallbacks. That still involves me putting my time and effort deconstructing all of these products, the customer, etc. So I think with time, I would say this first principle will continue to be the same, the obsession of looking at customers. I think the value add has been, for example, tools like voice to text converters, which make
So
it
it's
easier to
more
make
of a
notes.
productivity hack.
Yes, yes,
What
not
you
an
would.
intelligence hack. It is a
Okay.
productivity hack for me, because otherwise paying attention to customers and making notes is a little difficult.
Yes.
Now I'm actually obsessed with my customers, paying
Makes
attention
sense.
to them, but at least the note taking has been simplified for me. But the act of going through the notes is still my responsibility, because I've tried summarizing, and many times I see
Yeah, I mean,
what I want as the key input versus what it takes away are very different things,
absolutely.
which only shows my tuning for what I think as a meaningful insight is very different from what ChatGPT is tuned upon. So I would advise people, try hard not to use ChatGPT when you're starting up. It probably creates more biases than helps you spot opportunities.
Nice. I think we've had a very interesting conversation throughout.
Glad.
Before we kind of, get to the closure, I have a very fun, quick, rapid fire for you. So that
Okay, all right.
I mean,
Hopefully it's not
let's see what
embarrassing.
comes first to your mind when you
Okay.
hear this. Okay, so here goes the rapid fire for DSK.
Okay.
So you get around 5 seconds. No, not you get around 2 seconds to think and
Okay.
maybe 5-10 seconds to answer. First product you ever fell in love with.
Sony Walkman.
Okay. Who's harder to convince, user or stakeholder?
Stakeholders.
Okay. I think I already know the answer. AI or human intuition?
Human intuition.
Would you always want to build a product from scratch or take a scrappy product and make it see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Right now, I really want to build something grounds up.
Okay. And finally, what's your dream side project that you've always been dreaming to build, but you're not getting the resource, the time, and maybe the resilience?
The problem is there are 100 of these side projects.
It's
but
a
I'll
rapid
name
fire. I
one.
have to choose one.
Yes, one. I think for the longest time, I've wanted something called as the Memex. It's something that sees, records everything that I see and do. I have terrible memory, so I want something that remembers everything that I see and do. And for me to go back and say, what did I say last week? Why did I do this? So I love self-retrospection.
Okay.
Like, I do a lot of that, and sometimes my memory comes in the way of that. So I wish there was this device that could just see, remember everything that I see.
Why do I feel
This is Black Mirror.
Yeah. This will be like a dystopian future for me where everything of mine is recorded, but of course with the right
I mean, there's going to
privacy.
be the right guardrails and principles for it. But I generally feel that our human attention, our memory is terrible, right? Most of the bad choices that we make in life is
But
because
are we
of that.
not also programmed that way that we should forget certain things because we
It is
should
true.
not
It
we
is
should
true.
not go hard on ourselves because we should forget a couple of things. I think human mind is
100%. It's
made in
designed
a
to
way.
prevent us from misery.
Yes, exactly.
I hear you. But I think it's a fine balance. I think you can choose. If you have the controls to decide what to erase
Oh my God. Okay.
and what to remember, I think I would definitely like to remember certain very important things which
No.
make a difference in my life.
I agree. I would also have a bunch of things that I might have
And
forgot.
interestingly enough, I would also want to have the ability to look back at some of the hard times, the tough times, the sad times, to actually learn some things from it.
But anyway, I think the last hour or so has been very interesting. I've really
Thank you.
enjoyed the conversation, and I'm very confident that folks who tuned in, who listened to the conversations that we had, take away a lot of good practical pieces from, of course, experiences of DSK as a product, the things that. I mean, one key takeaway for me, at least from all this conversation, is resilience, perseverance, right? And the whole passion to make things is something that really drives product. And over that course of time, there's multiple things that you'll experience across different organizations, and it's all about how you adapt. When you understand from perspectives of others, you'll be able to build something really great. And with that said, thank you so much, DSK. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
And all the best for everything that's coming your way.
Thank you.
I'm very confident and hopeful that we are definitely going to see your dream to build a company like Sony come up. Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. But thank you so much for taking your time out and having me on the show, and also give me a platform to share my stories. Really appreciate it. And I'm hopeful that the audience also has some fun and learn something along the way. So thank you for having me here today. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, DSK. Thank you, folks. That's a wrap for our 4th episode of TechKeys by Mercari. See you next time.